Everyone, and welcome to our Cyber Shorts with Sophos, a LinkedIn Live series with the goal of bringing you insights on trending cybersecurity topics. Today, we're going to share some of those insights and how you can use them to better educate and defend your organization from cyber threats. I'm Blair Dunbar, and I head up communications for our Sophos XOps team. And with me is John Shire, our Sophos Field CISO. John, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Blair. I'm happy to be here.
So, to get started, ransomware attacks are often crimes of opportunity. We see them exploding the low-hanging fruit, like unpatched software or exposed remote access points. But adversaries are raising the stakes with far more targeted hands-on tactics. Two of those tactics that we've been seeing of late involve something called email bombing and phishing as a method to deploy ransomware. John, can you give a little bit more detail on what these tactics are?
Yeah, so email bombing, it's a type of attack where a victim will receive an extremely large number of messages over a very short period of time. The goal here is really just to overwhelm the recipient's inbox and make it difficult for them to do their jobs, to find legitimate messages. And it's often seen as a form of online harassment or denial of service, but the cyber criminals are also using these techniques against organizations. And voice phishing is pretty much what it sounds like. Instead of sending an unsolicited email to deceive people into releasing sensitive information or manipulate them somehow, the criminals actually call you up and impersonate some trusted entity, just like phishing emails do. And just like a phishing email, the callers will create some sense of urgency or fear to pressure the victims into complying with whatever their demands are. But however, unlike phishing emails, the callers, the voice calls feel more personal and trustworthy, which is why a lot of them succeed.
Okay. And so why do you think cyber criminals are adopting these approaches and that we're seeing them more frequently?
Yeah, like a lot of the cyber criminal techniques out there, they're using the combination of these two because it works. And in this scenario, email bombing is the pretext for voice phishing. Like I said, users will receive a ton of emails in a very short period of time. Then they'll receive some sort of unsolicited call from their IT support department. And usually they're spoofing some sort of ID here, either the caller ID or the messaging ID. And just they want to make it look like it's coming from inside the organization. And so when they call you, then they're offering to help with the sudden flood of messages. So they're creating a problem in step one, and they're offering a solution in step two.
Tapping into that fear. Um, and do you have any examples that Sophos has seen from the front lines of these tactics?
Yeah, so Sophos Managed Detection and Response observed about 15 incidents in the last quarter of 2024 that used both of these techniques. We actually published a story about the threat activity clusters that were responsible for these attacks on news.sophos.com. And in both sets of attacks, the threat actors operated their own Microsoft Office 365 service tenants. As part of the attacks, they also took advantage of a default Microsoft Teams configuration that permits users on external domains to initiate chats or meetings with an organization's internal users. So in the first example, the attackers sent over 3,000 messages in 45 minutes to a victim's inbox. And this was followed shortly by a Teams call from outside the organization from an account named Help Desk Manager. So, and since the organization had outsourced their IT services, it didn't really raise any alarm bells with the employee who received the call. During the call, the threat actor instructed the employee to allow a remote screen control session through Teams. And through this remote control session, the attacker was able to open a command shell and drop some files and execute malware. And they deployed all this from an external SharePoint file store. The files in this case included things like Java archive files and a zip file containing some Python code and some other components, including a backdoor. In the second set of cases, a few individuals at some targeted organizations were flooded with a massive amount of spam emails again, followed this time by an inbound Microsoft Teams message from someone claiming to be from their internal IT. The Teams message, which was obviously sent by the attackers who were responsible for the spam messages, then requested a Teams call to resolve all of these spam issues. And in each of the incidents that we investigated, the adversary walked the user through the process of installing Microsoft Quick Assist over that Teams call. The user was told to go search for the application on the web, download it from the legitimate Microsoft website, and then launch it. They were then guided through how to grant the threat actors access to control the device remotely. And this was used to establish a remote session that gave the threat actors control over the targeted individual's machine. And over the course of these attacks, the criminals established persistence. They moved laterally through the network using, RDP and WinRM. They established some command and control mechanisms. And in one incident specifically, the attackers attempted to uninstall some local multi-factor authentication. And in another one, they actually tried to uninstall the Sophos endpoint agent, which was thankfully blocked by tamper protection. And then later on during a threat hunt, we also found one case where the actors attempted to deploy Black Basta ransomware, and thankfully this was also blocked by Sophos.
Very persistent. And so then, well, you've answered this a little bit, but it's not just one ransomware group doing this. What groups have we seen using this techniques? Do you expect others to adopt it?
Yeah, so in the first couple examples I mentioned Black Basta, there was also Fin7, which is more of a financially motivated crime group. They don't really do ransomware, but unfortunately, these techniques have continued to be used by cyber criminals. As of last month, we've seen at least 55 attempted attacks using these techniques, including one from the 3 a.m. ransomware group, which has been around since about 2023. And in this case, the attacker used an actual telephone call instead of a Teams message or a Teams call that spoofed the number of the organization's internal IT department. During that attack, they deployed a virtual machine to the compromised computer, again using Quick Assist, which provided the attackers an initial foothold in the network, but also was crucially hidden from the endpoint protection software. The ransomware attack itself was blocked, but the attackers were able to dwell on the network or stay inside the network for 9 days before actually attempting to launch the ransomware. They ultimately succeeded in stealing some data from the target organization's network. But what's interesting about this attack is that the 3 a.m. ransomware group actually performed reconnaissance of the organizations that they were targeting before the attack started. And this included looking for employee email addresses and the phone numbers of the organization's internal IT departments. And so they used that information to tailor their attack. Now, thankfully, the attack itself had very limited impact. It only affected one unmanaged host to launch some remote. They were trying to launch remote ransomware attacks across the network. All of the other attacks, including the inbound remote ransomware attacks, were actually blocked by CryptoGuard.
Okay, so with that information and just taking a step back, as we're continuing to see ransomware make the headlines and hear of these devastating impact and just how persistent and targeted they are, what is just the overall current state of ransomware in 2025 as you see it?
Yeah, so organizations, they're continuing to feel the effects of ransomware. So Sophos just published the latest State of Ransomware survey, and in it we highlight why organizations are falling victim to ransomware, details on both ransom demands and payments, and also the impacts of ransomware on both businesses and the humans that have to deal with it. For the third year running, we found that exploiting vulnerabilities and compromised credentials were the two most common root causes of attacks. And this also coincides with a statistic where 38% of respondents stated that the operational root cause was due to a known security gap that had not been addressed. Now, in good news, we saw that there were declining levels of data encryption, which signals that we're getting better at stopping these attacks before they get to the ransomware stage. But in nearly a third of the attacks, the attackers also stole data, and 49% of victims paid the ransom. And while the costs of ransomware are going down compared to last year, the human impact is definitely being felt. Over 40% of the respondents indicated that they had experienced increased levels of stress and anxiety about future attacks. Now, the report, that's just a sampling of what's in the report, and the report is packed with statistics and includes breakdowns for things like organizational size, industry, and revenue. So you can find that report at news.sophos.com.
So then, Given all that, perhaps the most important question, what can organizations do in 2025 to protect themselves from ransomware and these similar hands-on keyboard targeted attacks?
First and foremost, we need to strive to prevent these attacks as much as possible. Organizations are going, when we think about these specific techniques, organizations are going to want to possibly restrict some of the external access features in Teams and possibly even use something like application control to block unwanted executions of remote access tools like Quick Assist. And since these techniques aren't typically covered in the traditional anti-phishing training, organizations are now going to have to raise awareness for these new techniques with their employees as well. We also strongly recommend that you use Microsoft Office 365 integrations with your security tools so that you can monitor for any of these potentially malicious inbound Teams or Outlook traffic. That telemetry can lead you to early detection, which is really important if you want to stop attacks before they get to that ultimate stage of ransomware. And then following a detection, organizations need to have a specific and tested response plan that can allow for the swift and comprehensive remediation from some of these attacks. So in other words, you need to limit the risk by preventing as much as you can. You need to continuously monitor the environment for suspicious events. And finally, you need to be ready to respond.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. Stay tuned, everyone, for future Cyber Short episodes coming soon. And be sure for more insights and information from Sophos to read our blog and follow our social channels.